sometimes makes people sign this one.
Kevin Proteau here with Locals Supporting Locals for another special segment of the Heartbeat of the Okanagan. So we're down here at the Lakeside Resort, and we're here with Cara Lee, and they're hosting the Save Skaha Park second annual AGM, the annual general meeting. Can you tell us, Cara Lee, what people can expect to see with your meeting here?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Yes, tonight we are proud that we've actually achieved our mandate, which is stopping commercialisation at Skaha Park, with the help, of course, of all our supporters. Over 5,000 members support us. That has been enormous. Because we've reached our mandate, we sent out a survey and we asked our members, did they want us to continue and in what format? So tonight we have new resolutions on the floor, new motions to continue as a society in a different format. It's up to the members who attend tonight whether we continue or not, but we have stopped commercialisation of Skaha Park, and that was huge.
Yeah, so we're just waiting for them to sign the dotted line.
Absolutely.
And until that's signed,
there won't be any commercialisation now in Skaha Park at all. But we've had such a wonderful following, Kevin, that people want us to continue in some format. So tonight's AGM will determine how we continue and in what format.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Great to see such a turnout this evening, and of course today was a beautiful day to experience our parks, that's for sure. What a wonderful day to be out there in the grass and on the trees and experience our fall. It's beautiful. Anyway, there's a couple of things I have to get out of the way before we get started. One is to say that registration of society members is necessary this evening. If you haven't done it, you of course can do that at the front. And the societies and the members in attendance will be allowed to vote, of course. And voting will be done by a show of hands. Okay, and the directors have set the quorum of 15 members, and we've got that. Let me see, there's enough. And certainly I can declare there's a quorum that's here this evening. But in regards to the election of officers, one thing for clarification here. If there's an election of officers, any officer required, it needs 2 members of this group to ask for a secret ballot. Okay? So we're clear on that. Otherwise, if there's only one person asking for that, then we go by show of hands. Okay? Just so you understand. And tonight's agenda, as I say, is quite extensive, and we're very pleased to have a guest here this evening. And I will introduce him a little later. But anyway, before we go into the agenda, which I say I'm trying to accommodate you this evening by the agenda itself saying we could be concluded by 9 o'clock. I'd like to do that because nothing worse for me to see people disappearing before the agenda is finished with. There's some important items at the very end of this agenda too. So with that, I want to say first and foremost that we had the passing of an individual, of course, that fought hard for the same thing that we're fighting for here. We have been fighting for the last 2.5 years. And unfortunately, he passed away. And he represented, as you may know, the Penticton Citizens First group. And that, of course, is Nelson Milkey. I would like to just have a moment of silence. Miko, I'm sorry. Look at that. Milkey. I'd like to have a moment of silence just to recognize his efforts and his campaign towards the same goals and objectives that we've had through this Save Skaha Park Society. Would you please recognize that by our heads and just give a few minutes of silence? Thank you. Thank you for that. I will now call the meeting to order. As you know, I'm the chair for this evening and have been acting as president over the last year. So, first of all, I just want to make a comment. And that comment came from one of our members, Dr. Jerry Carr. As I said, we've had 2.5 years in this campaign now as this committee. And Jerry made a comment the other day which I thought was very appropriate. And that is, he said, it's been a long journey and we still have a way to go. We do. Because tonight you're going to see what we're asking council to adopt to ensure that no parkland is ever invaded or attempted to be leased out, as was in the past couple of years. Without voter approval, thank you. And I think that sort of sums up where we come from. The other thing is, I'd like to advise you that this evening we are having it filmed. Kevin Proteau is there doing the filming of this, and it will all be on video. If you wish to review it at a later date, that's your entire ability to do that.
Locals,
Okay.
supportinglocals.ca is the website. It'll be
There you
up.
go, he's promoting himself, right? Okay, first item on the agenda then, if you have it in front of you, is the motion to approve the notice of meeting, which has been provided via email and certainly in the media through advertisements. Could I have a motion to so move? Is there a second on the floor? Second to the motion to approve the agenda? Seconded, thank you. Ben Amos. Okay, the second item of the agenda is to approve the AGM of 2016 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, that shows you how rusty I've got. Gonna sharpen up my pencil a little bit. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. The motion was duly seconded. Is all those in favor to adopt this circuit? Thank you very much. Motion against? Motion approved. Thank you.
Starts to court.
Okay, and then I need a motion to approve the AGM minutes of 2016.
I make that motion.
Motion's been made from the secretary. Is there a seconder on the motion? Seconder on the motion. Any discussion on the AGM minutes of the last year? If not, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. And of course, we have the agenda this evening. I've asked for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated and as amended. That's the 2017 agenda. Moved by the secretary again. Is there a seconder on the motion? Seconder on the motion. Thank you. All those, pardon me, is there any discussion on the agenda? No? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving right along. As being circulated, you have the biographies of us as our committee, as a committee structure. We've been in place now, as I say, for 2.5 years. So I think you're all familiar with our biographies, so we don't need to go into those. If you wish to have them, they're online. But I don't think we need to go through that. I don't want to. Yes. See, shows you I'm rusty. I'm getting past the notes. Yes, absolutely right. But before we go into the next item on the agenda, two of those gentlemen are going to be presenting the issue before us this evening, the major issue before us this evening, I should say. On my left, Lenore Robson. She looks after our volunteers and does a great job getting people to come out and help us out and get this over. And the dynamic duo of Dwayne and Lisa. I've got to say this before I go any further. I've worked with a lot of committees and I've worked with councils, obviously. And one thing I will say that these people that I've been working with for the last 2.5 years are incredibly dedicated to this cause. I will say that. Absolutely incredible. Their cause, and Lisa is the one that sends all that correspondence out to you via email. Dwayne looks after the treasury, looks after the finances of the organization, which he's done a tremendous job on. And as you look at those statements, you'll see that a lot of the costs have been legal fees to get clarification on legislation, community charters, etc. And here is Carol Lee Donahue. What time is it? Carol is our recording secretary, actually, and she's put through the agenda this evening, so you have all that in front of you. Over here on my left are two gentlemen. They're going to be presenting, I think, one of the most important issues before us this evening and what will become before council. And of course, in conjunction with that, we have, and I'm really appreciative of this, I think the whole committee is very appreciative of this, Peter Weaver, our new city administrator, is here. Peter came to us from Terrace, and he came here in January of this year, and I think he's realized that the importance of this whole issue that's been raised in our community, this one that we've been involved with, all you have been involved with your financial contributions and your dedication to see this resolved to the trio application for a 30-year lease. And I think Peter has recognized that the sensitivity of this whole thing is before the community still. It's not resolved. And I think Peter wants to be here to let you know how he is going to address this issue. I talked to him earlier, and he said he's willing to answer questions on anything, which sort of opens him up to the rest of the agenda for the rest of the evening, I think. Because there's a lot of issues, of course, he's addressing in the community. But he's very qualified, and I will say this, and I'm very pleased to say this. Since I left office in 2008, Peter is the first municipal officer to come here with that background and that education of municipal affairs. Prior to Peter's arrival, we had two administrators who were not qualified within municipal government, which concerned me deeply because I watched their progress and I watched what they were attempting to do, which totally was wrong with the direction this community was going. That's my piece off my chest to Peter. I really appreciate it. I've had a lot of meetings with Peter already on other issues. Anyway, and on my far left, there's the two generals of the group, I guess you might say. They're directors at large right now, but anyway, Gary Denton, Dr. Jerry Carr, I would say they're directors at large, but the two of these gentlemen have been directed to look after the legal matters in regards to the events we've gone through in the last 2.5 years. They've done a tremendous job. They've done a superb job with respect to the legislation. Not only that, but a superb job in digging out the history behind the 2002 42 bylaw that was passed by referendum. And they're going to speak to that this evening, and it's a very lengthy proposal that they're going to put forward to you. But they want to make sure you're understanding what the process will be from here on to get the council to look after the parks issue forever. Forever meaning that they will never attempt what they attempted to do with Skaha Park again. They will not be allowed to if the bylaw that they present this evening will be passed. So with that, I'm going to bring them up.
You haven't introduced yourself.
Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm incognito, you know that.
Yeah, that was fun.
I'm Jake. Jake from, yeah. Okay. Anyway, as I said, and I will invite the two gentlemen up here. I think you want to speak from there, don't you? Unless I take the microphone over there. I think we can do that. So I'm going to hand the meeting over to these two gentlemen, Gary and Jerry. It sounds like a comedy act. No, they're not. They're not comedians. They got terrible jokes.
Thank you, Jake. Can you hear me? Our role right now is really to summarize what's happened since the end of the TRIO agreement, which everybody here is familiar with, so we don't need to go over that past history. And in particular, to set the stage for comments that Peter Weaver is going to make, so that we have context for his comments. So, after the decision was made to abandon the TRIO water park agreement, it was also the same time as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Committee was getting underway. It had already been established, but it was getting underway at that point in time. And so we knew that our green space in Skaha Park was protected. But we also were aware that this could be a one-time only thing, and future assaults on our parks could occur again, that we would have to fight as we did with Skaha Park. But we had hoped that these Parks and Recreation Master Plan process would enable us to get the protection that we were looking for ongoing. As the Parks and Recreation Master Plan process continued, and by the way, we're very grateful that Gary was received as a member of that committee, a little bit late, but still a member of that committee. As that process unfolded, we became aware that it really is not, whatever comes out of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is not going to be legally binding. It's a guideline, and it will be a working document. And it's not a policy statement in and of itself. It can make policy recommendations, absolutely. But then it depends on council to decide what it wants to do with those policy recommendations. And we felt some sense of urgency to move forward on the next phase of our work. We had won the battle, if you can call it that, with Skaha Park by overturning the trio agreement for a water slide. But the war was another matter. The war is making sure, to the best of our ability, that this never happens again. And that means dealing with the parks dedication bylaw that was passed in 2002 by in a referendum with 91% voting. It gave in favor. It gave the promise that our parks would be protected, and until June of 2015, when the trio agreement was put forward, we thought they were protected. We now learned that it was an illusion. They aren't protected by that bylaw. So now what we have to do if we want to protect our parks going forward is we have to do something to correct that. And so it really is a matter of now deciding how can we do that and recognizing that the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Committee can only be a guideline. We consulted our lawyer in June of this year and asked him, what are our options? What can we do here to give that kind of protection? And he did some research. Actually, he just pulled together some work that he'd already done. And he said it's really very simple. What you need to do is have those parks first of all, have reference plans prepared of those parks, which requires some survey work, and to have those reference plans deposited in the land titles office, which then, as dedicated parks, falls under section 29(1) of the community charter, and because of that, provides clear, explicit, and legally binding protection of our parks in the future from disposition. Disposition is a legal term, but it includes leasing. From disposition without approval of the electorate. Approval of the electorate can include the alternative approval process, or it can include an electoral vote. At the choice of the council. Thanks. And so we are now in the process of, we presented that proposal. We worked on it with our lawyer over the summer. It took several iterations with Gary and I working very closely with the lawyer till we felt satisfied that we had a document that really delivered what we wanted it to deliver, delivered it concisely and explicitly and clearly. And we presented it to the city administration on October the 13th, last week. I think it's fair for me to say, Peter, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that your reception initially was encouraging. That you have to do, so obviously it's complex, you have to look at it carefully, you can't make any commitment until you do. We understand that. But it is promising. And so we are on a track now to continue discussions, hopefully, with the city in which we will optimistically end up with a new park dedication bylaw that will give legally binding protection of our parks from disposition, including leasing, going forward without assent of the electorate, without approval of the electorate. I'm going to turn over to Gary now and see if you have anything to add.
I'll start off with a general comment that the people in this room represent Save Skaha Park Society, which is some 5,000 plus signed up. I think we could have signed up more if we just had the manpower. But we have to take a look back in the last 12 months and realize the accomplishments that we collectively have made. 12 months ago, the water slide proposal was still on the table, and we were fighting like hell to try to stop it. That has been abandoned. Secondly, the city has been, was persuaded to terminate the agreement in their entirety with Trio. And that was partially as a result of the public pressure put on them, principally by the group that you represent here today. So when you look at it, we've made a lot of progress, and as Jerry had said, we've come a long way, but there's a further road on this journey. But I think we should be thankful for what we've accomplished, and thankful for what's looking optimistically ahead of us, because we're getting good reception from the city. So I'll move briefly to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Steering Committee, and in this agenda later on, I'll give us a short report on that process specifically. But how it comes into play here is that principally with the arrival of Peter Weaver as the new administrator and his instructions from council that they could see in, I think it was April or May, that it wasn't working. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan wasn't getting done what the public was expecting it to do. The council recognized it, they heard it on the street, they heard it from their constituents, probably people like you are bending their ears saying, I'm hearing that we're not going to get referendums or whatever we require so that we can have ultimate decisions about happening in our parks. The council and the administration recognized it, and they immediately allotted more resources, extended the deadline. We were under pressure to complete this by June, and that was extended. It means more time on the committee, but it does mean it's going to be a better job done with this master plan. The master plan was last written in 1993, and it's long overdue. As Jerry said, the master plan, the Parks and Recreation master plan, is only a policy. It's a guide to how you operate and administer your parks and how you develop them, but it's not a binding agreement. But we've had much more success in the past 5 or 6 months of developing a master plan that we can all look back on and be proud of. I think that the master plan will continue for another several months, and hopefully we'll wind it up in December or January, and then it'll be put in final form and presented to council for adoption. Where do we go from here? This proposal was presented to the administration, and I'll let Peter speak to where it might go from here. And by the way, if there's questions in the group about this proposal of the park dedication bylaw, then I suggest that we leave them until after both Jerry and I have finished speaking to it, as well as Peter Weaver. So that at the end of Peter's presentation, if you have questions, Peter told me before he came, and by the way, Peter offered to come. We didn't approach him. He said, I'll come to that meeting if you like, and we accepted with enthusiasm. He said he'll answer questions you have from the floor, but we want to keep it to park-related questions, not other issues in the city that you may wish to talk about. Not here, not tonight. They may be valid, but keep it to park-related. Where we go from here is the process is to take, the community charter is not clear on on what has to take place in the type of park that Skaha Park is and other major parks in the city. It wasn't dedicated by bylaw. It wasn't given in lieu like as a development cost charge. And if nothing else, we've determined that it's a legal argument, but we don't want to end up there again. We were prepared to go to court, and part of the reason that our lawyer was able to come up with this proposal is that he had done a lot of background work in preparation for a trial on whether the city of Penticton had the jurisdiction to do what they did. We don't want to have that argument again because we could win and the city could lose. And we all lose. So what we're attempting to do, and this is the suggestion put forth in this proposal that you all received by email. And by the way, in that proposal, don't omit reading Appendix G, which is at the very end of the appendices. That is the crux of the legal argument, but we didn't put it in the body of the agreement because it's legal and it's confusing and it can bog you down as a reader. But it's there, and I think after reading it, the common impression that people will get is that this is complicated and it's not clear. So we want to make it clear. All the principal parks in Penticton, the 12 that were identified in 2002, and they're the large ones from Munson Mountain to Queen's Park, Kings Park to Skaha Park, not the community parks, not neighborhood parks. Those 12 that were named, and move them into a classification that is clearly identified by the community charter as as requiring approval of the electorate for disposal. Yes, those classifications of parks require approval of the electorate for disposal including leasing, before any park can be disposed of. To do that, there's a survey required that can be deposited in the Land Title Office. It's either a reference or an explanatory plan, and there are some logistical issues to go through. But the first one, before we get there, we're getting ahead of ourselves, is for the City of Penticton, the Council and Administration to get behind this and agree with us that this is the longer-term solution to the protection of our parks that the public is expecting and deserves.
Hello? Got it? Now, okay. So just to close and sort of underscore the point that Gary was just making, is giving these parks the protection they deserve is one really important step forward in regaining the trust of the community in our civic governance. That's really important. And that's why we're encouraging the city to look at this positively, which they seem to be so far.
Okay, then I will now ask Peter. Peter, do you want to come up here? I think it'd be best for you. But as we indicated earlier, Peter is here to answer questions on process from here. And certainly he's advised me that he's willing to answer any questions on city affairs, but that could take the meeting for a while, which I don't really want to have. So try and be precise with your questions and stick to the issue before us. I think what has been set out by Gary and Jerry is where we want to go with the city on this, and Peter has already seen the documents, so he can refer to them and certainly pass comment to you. Okay, appreciate that, and we have a roving mic here, so Chris, maybe you want to take it up and get ready for any questions. Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter.
Thanks, folks. Can you hear me? No. Okay, we'll have to get closer to this thing. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, loud and proud. Thank you for having me today. I want to thank Jake and the crew here. I haven't had the opportunity to meet too much with this side of the table, but they've certainly been visible in some of the meetings I've attended. maybe I can give you a little context as far as my involvement in this whole parks discussion, but I guess maybe I'll give you a little indication on who I am, where I come from. I come from a small town near Smithers, BC, in between Terrace and Smithers, called Hazelton. Anybody been to Hazelton? Yeah, well, been blessed. It's a beautiful little community, but it's a community where my father served until his death a few years ago. For 23 years on council as either mayor or a councillor. So I grew up in and around local government and never really wanted to get involved in local government, but I got involved in the private sector and sold things and managed things, and somehow I ended up in this business, and it was a good move for me because having grown up in it, I understand the power of the people. I understand the importance of listening to the people that pay the bills, and whether they be the residents or the business people. I certainly understand anger and passion. My dad was a very fiery, passionate guy, and when he didn't like something, we certainly heard about it. The one funniest thing I'll tell you, when we all got of age to work, you never wanted for nothing in my dad's house until you were old enough to work. And then if you were in that house and you didn't have a job, it wasn't a very comfortable place to be. But if you're in that house and you had a job, you never had anything to worry about. So I think the same applies to dealing with communities. If you're doing a good job, the community will be generally supportive. Probably won't agree with you all the time, but as long as they trust the processes and believe in what you're saying, whether you agree or not, they feel that you're being fair, then things usually work out. Sometimes we go off the path and our processes aren't the way they should be. And since I've gotten here, I've been working with city staff and with council to build a system, a meaningful, trusted system that you can count on for when we come across issues like this. We don't end up, as much as we like to get together, in groups like this. We can communicate in council chambers and through letters to the editor, Alvina. Just up for the record, there is no outstanding lawsuit. I checked into that. There is no lawsuit. There was confusion there, and I can understand why, because nobody really closed the loop on you there, but I'm here to say that there is no lawsuit against you or pending litigation. So, anyway, I appreciate it. I watched the video you, that was very good. I would never have taken you on. So, let's start back with the parks business. So council, it was in April or May, we had a discussion meeting and council says, listen, this has gotten this far. We felt like we made some progress in December when they moved the water slide. Clearly that was progress. But obviously we felt we weren't meeting the needs and the desires of the community to find policy that will help protect parks. So council said, listen, we give you the mandate to work with the groups and do whatever you can to get us to this point where we are today. So council said, basically gave us authority to operate on their behalf. And the first move we did was pull all the groups together. That was Citizens First, the Save Skaha folks, yourselves, and city staff, and the Parks Master Planning Committee. And we had what we called it at the time a little bit of a peace accord. We all agreed that instead of working independently, we were going to work together to try to figure out how to solve this problem that we were in. We all agreed that we wanted to do one thing, and that's why we pulled together at that point, was to protect parks. So from that moment on, things changed. And I think Gary and Jerry can agree that the tone changed very quickly. Shortly after that, Anthony Haddad, is everybody familiar with Anthony, is our Development Services Director, and I got together and said, listen, if the master plan is a visionary document that won't bind anybody to any rules, let's start developing policy that will. So our first step there was the park use policy, which all groups were involved in starting.